The bathroom was a sanctuary, the steam curling around me like a warm embrace. I sighed as the water cascaded down my body, the heat seeping into my skin, easing the tension in my muscles. The day had been long, and this moment, this quiet, private moment, was all mine. Or so I thought. My fingers trailed over my skin, slick with soap and water, as I let my mind wander. The thoughts came unbidden, a mix of memories and fantasies that made my breath hitch. My hand drifted lower, brushing against the sensitive skin between my thighs. A soft gasp escaped my lips, and I leaned back against the cool tiles, letting the sensation take hold. I was lost in the rhythm, in the way my body responded to every touch, every stroke. My eyes fluttered closed, and for a moment, it felt like the world outside didn't exist. But then, there was a shift. A subtle change in the air that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, my hand stilling mid-motion. The door. It was slightly ajar, just enough for a sliver of light to spill in from the hallway. Had I forgotten to close it all the way? My pulse quickened, and I stared at the crack, willing it to stay still. But then I saw it, the shadow moving just beyond the threshold. Someone was there. Watching. Waiting. Who's there? My voice trembled, barely above a whisper, but it echoed in the small space. There was no answer, only the sound of my own breathing, ragged and uneven. Slowly, I reached for the shower curtain, pulling it across to shield myself. But not before I caught a glimpse of him. Ethan. My stepson. His eyes were wide, dark with something I couldn't quite place. Desire? Curiosity? Guilt? He looked away quickly, his cheeks flushing, but he didn't move. Didn't leave. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of what had just happened hanging heavy in the air. Ethan, I said his name softly, my voice trembling. What are you doing here? He hesitated, his jaw tightening as if he were wrestling with himself. Then, finally, he stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The sound sent shivers down my spine. He shouldn't be here. This wasn't right. And yet there was something about the way he looked at me, the intensity in his gaze, that made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't ignore. I'm sorry, he stammered, his voice rough, almost pained. I didn't mean to. He trailed off, his eyes dropping to the floor, but not before flickering back up to meet mine. There was heat there, a raw hunger that made my breath catch. I should have stopped him. Should have told him to leave, to forget what he'd seen. But the words stuck in my throat, drowned out by the pounding of my heart. My skin tingled where the water had touched it, and I felt an ache deep inside, one that I hadn't acknowledged in years. Not since. No. I couldn't go there. Couldn't let myself think about it. But Ethan was here, standing so close that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His chest rose and fell with each breath, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. He wanted me. I could see it in the way he looked at me, in the way his body seemed to strain against some invisible force. You shouldn't be here, I whispered, though the words lacked conviction. My fingers tightened around the edge of the shower curtain, clinging to it like a lifeline. Ethan took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. I know, he said, his voice low, almost a growl. But I can't stop thinking about you. About this. His hand reached out, trembling slightly, and brushed against the curtain. I could feel the heat of his touch through the thin fabric, and my body reacted instinctively, tightening with anticipation. My mind screamed at me to push him away, to end this before it went any further. But my body had other ideas. Ethan, I breathed his name again, this time more plea than warning. My legs felt weak, my knees threatening to buckle under the weight of my own desire. The water continued to pour down around me, drowning out everything except the sound of his breathing, the faint rustle of fabric as he moved closer. And then he pulled the curtain aside, revealing me fully, exposed, vulnerable. His eyes raked over me, taking in every inch of my wet, glistening skin. The hunger in his gaze was undeniable now, and it ignited something deep within me, something primal and utterly forbidden. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I've never seen anything like you." My breath hitched, and I felt a surge of warmth between my legs. "This is wrong," a voice in my head whispered, but it was drowned out by the rush of blood in my ears, by the heat pooling low in my belly. My hand clutched at the tile behind me, seeking stability, but there was none to be found. Only him. Only Ethan. He stepped into the shower with me, the spray soaking through his clothes, plastering them to his body. The sight of him, drenched and desperate, sent a shiver through me. My hardened peaks hardened beneath the stream of water, and I bit my lip to stifle a moan. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Tell me to stop." But I couldn't. Wouldn't. Instead, I reached for him, my fingers tangling in the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer until our bodies were pressed together. The heat of him seared through me, igniting a fire that I couldn't control. My lips parted, and I tilted my head back, offering myself to him. Ethan didn't hesitate. His mouth crashed down on mine, hungry and insistent. The kiss was everything I needed and nothing I expected, desperate, consuming, filled with a longing that mirrored my own. His hands roamed over my body, exploring every curve, every dip, as if committing me to memory. "I want you," he groaned against my lips, his voice rough with need. "God, I want you so much." The words sent a thrill through me, and I arched into his touch, my body responding eagerly to his every caress. My fingers fumbled with the buttons of his shirt, tugging it open to reveal the hard planes of his chest. I could feel his heart pounding beneath my fingertips, its rhythm matching my own. "Then take me," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The steam from the shower curled around us like a veil, obscuring the edges of reality and blurring the lines between right and wrong. Ethan's lips were still on mine, his kiss deepening with every passing second, as if he could taste the hesitation mingling with my desire. His hands moved over my skin, trailing water droplets like liquid fire, leaving me breathless and trembling. The heat of his body pressed against mine was electric, sending shivers down my spine despite the warmth of the water cascading around us. I pulled back slightly, my chest rising and falling rapidly, my breaths shallow and uneven. "Ethan," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper, "we shouldn't, this is..." But he silenced me with another kiss, his fingers tangling in my wet hair, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. "I can't stop," he breathed against my lips, his voice raw, almost pleading. "I don't want to." His words sent a jolt through me, igniting something primal that I had tried so hard to suppress. My hands reached for him instinctively, sliding over his shoulders, down his chest, feeling the tension coiled beneath his skin. He was all lean muscle and restless energy, his body vibrating with unspoken need. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, dark and intense, as if he was trying to memorize every detail of this moment. The water spilled over us, slicking our bodies together, making every touch more intimate, more urgent. His fingertips traced the curve of my waist, dipping lower, exploring with a boldness that made my pulse race. I gasped as his hand found the swell of my hip, his grip firm yet tender, possessive yet reverent. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I've thought about this, about you, for so long." His confession hung in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. I could see it in his eyes, the years of longing, the nights spent wrestling with guilt and desire, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. It was all there, laid bare in the dim light of the bathroom, under the steady patter of the shower. My heart pounded in my chest, a chaotic rhythm that mirrored the storm raging inside me. I reached up to cup his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw with my thumb. "Ethan," I said softly, my voice trembling, "this is dangerous. We can't just..." I don't care, he interrupted, his tone fierce, unwavering. His hands tightened around me, pulling me even closer until our bodies were flush against each other. I've tried to fight it, to push it away, but I can't anymore. I need you, please. The vulnerability in his voice broke through the last of my resolve. How could I deny him when I felt the same pull, the same irresistible craving? My fingers slid down his neck, over his collarbone, resting against the rapid beat of his heart. Me too, I admitted, my voice barely audible over the sound of the water. I need you too. His response was immediate, a low growl of satisfaction that rumbled deep in his chest. His mouth found mine again, hissing me with a hunger that left me dizzy. His hands roamed freely now, mapping every inch of my body, learning me in ways that felt both new and achingly familiar. The heat between us was unbearable, a slow burn that threatened to consume us both. Ethan's lips trailed down my neck, leaving a path of fire in their wake. His teeth grazed my skin lightly, sending a shiver coursing through me. I arched into him, my nails digging into his shoulders as I clung to him for balance. The sensation of his mouth on me was overwhelming, every touch amplifying the ache growing deep inside me. Tell me what you want, he whispered against my skin, his breath hot and unsteady. Tell me, and I'll give it to you. I hesitated for a moment, caught between the thrill of his offer and the fear of crossing a line we could never uncross. But then his hand slid lower, skimming over the curve of my thigh, and all rational thought fled. You, I breathed, my voice breaking. I want you. He didn't need to be told twice. With a groan, he lifted me effortlessly, pressing me against the tiled wall of the shower. The cool surface contrasted sharply with the heat of his body, a delicious juxtaposition that made me gasp. His hands gripped my hips firmly, holding me in place as he positioned himself between my legs. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. There was nothing but the two of us, the water pouring down around us, and the intensity of what we were about to do. His gaze burned into mine, filled with a mixture of desire and something deeper, something that made my heart clench. And then, slowly, deliberately, he pushed forward, filling me completely. A moan escaped my lips, loud and unrestrained, as I felt him stretch me, claim me in a way that left no room for doubt. His name tumbled from my mouth, a broken prayer, as I wrapped my legs around him, pulling him deeper. Ethan groaned low in his throat, his forehead pressing against mine as he began to move. Each thrust was deliberate, measured, as if he was savoring every second of this forbidden connection. His hands gripped my hips tightly, guiding me to meet his movements, creating a rhythm that was as natural as breathing. The pleasure built quickly, a relentless wave that threatened to sweep me away. Every nerve in my body was alight, every touch, every movement intensifying the sensations coursing through me. I clutched at him desperately, my fingers digging into his back as I fought to hold on. Ethan, I gasped, my voice trembling with need. Don't stop. He didn't. If anything, his pace quickened, his thrusts becoming harder, more urgent. The sound of our ragged breathing echoed in the small space, mingling with the steady rush of the water. His lips found mine again, swallowing my cries as we moved together, lost in a world where only we existed. The tension coiled tighter and tighter, winding me up until I felt like I might shatter. And then, with one final, desperate thrust, I fell over the edge, my body convulsing around him as pleasure exploded through me. Ethan followed soon after, his groan muffled against my shoulder as he found his release. For a long moment, we stayed like that, clinging to each other as the water washed away the evidence of what we'd done. My legs trembled, my body still buzzing with the aftershocks of pleasure. His breath was warm against my skin, his heartbeat pounding in sync with mine. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered me back to my feet, his arms encircling me to keep me upright. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I saw the same mix of emotions reflected in his gaze. Desire, yes, but also something softer, something that made my chest ache. What happens now? I asked softly, my voice barely audible over the sound of the shower. He hesitated, his thumb brushing against my cheek in a gesture that was almost tender. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice rough. "But I don't regret it. Not for a second." Neither did I, though the thought terrified me. As I stood there, wrapped in his arms, I couldn't help but wonder what this meant for us, for the fragile balance we'd just shattered. But for now, I pushed those thoughts aside, choosing instead to lose myself in the warmth of his embrace, in the lingering echoes of what we'd shared. The water continued to pour down around us, washing away the remnants of guilt, if only for a little while.